Life can get hectic when you start a family, but Which can help you make confident decisions from improving your home to financial planning. We'll make sure you're prepared. Whether you're looking to reduce your household bills, seeking advice around your child's health, or want to find our best buys for your new home, Which has got you covered. Use our expert advice to make the right choices for you and your growing family by visiting which.co.uk/growing family. That's where you'll find everything you need to make confident decisions and have peace of mind that all the advice you're getting is 100% independent. So to find out more, just head to which.co.uk/growing family.
When life gives you questions, Which? Get answers.
Welcome to the Which Money Podcast, your weekly hit of money news and personal finance hacks to help make you better off. I'm your host, Lucia Ariano, and here's what's coming up this week.
It's not all about fees. Fees are obviously really important, but don't forget to consider other factors when you're choosing where you can invest your money, which platform to pick, but also the investments themselves.
Is the provider offering the account that you want? What's their customer service like? What's their financial backing like? Like lots of things in life, you can get a bargain basement, very cheap price for things, but you might be compromising on the range of investments or the customer service or how you can contact them, or being able to have a stocks and shares ISA rather than a general investment account.
This week, we're deep diving into investment portfolios and exploring the different fees you have to pay depending on where you've got your money. And joining us to shine a light on all of this is Megan Thomas, a researcher here at Which, and Laura Suter, Director of Personal Finance at AJ Bell. Welcome both.
Hello.
Hi.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us. Shall we start then with an overview of the kinds of investment fees we'll be talking about today? And if there's any way to avoid them, or in other words, is it possible to invest for free? Megan, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, so there are quite a lot of different fees that you'll pay depending on what you're investing in. So there are the account fees. So when you set up, an investment account with a provider, you're most likely going to pay them some fees. Mm-hmm. There are some that are free, but generally you'll pay an account fee. And then you'll also pay transaction fees. Mm-hmm. Again, some platforms don't charge these, but generally that's if you, buy a share, sell a share or a fund, you'll pay some kind of fee. Then away from the platforms, if you're investing in a fund, you'll pay a fund fee. If you're investing in shares, you might pay some other fees. So if you're investing in a US stock, you'll pay foreign exchange fees, or any other country. If you're investing in a UK stock, you'll pay stamp duty. So there's all these different fees, and some platforms charge for some of them and some of them don't. But you'll always pay some kind of these fees. You'll never get it completely free.
Well, we'll be getting into which platforms do and don't as we go through the show. But for any beginners listening then, Laura, which of these fees is it worth getting your head around from the start?
So I think there's a couple that are particularly key. So the platform fee or the account fee, as Megan mentioned, that's quite a biggie for beginners, because if you're starting with a small amount of money, you want to make sure that that's not eating into it too much. And some platforms have a minimum account fee each month. And if you're putting a small amount in, then that minimum account fee could end up being quite a big percentage of the money that you're putting in. And equally, dealing fees or transaction costs, they're often called. These are the costs that you pay to buy and sell investments. You need to keep an eye on those because, for example, if you're putting in £50 into a fund, but you're paying a £10 transaction cost to buy that, that's 20% of your money gone already. So that's something else that you really need to keep an eye on if you're starting out with smaller amounts of money.
We will get into this later on, but are they often, flat fees compared to kind of a percentage of the amount you're putting in or buying?
Yeah, so that platform fee or account fee, that can be a percentage fee or it can be a flat fee. And obviously it depends how much money you're investing as to which one might work best for you. So it's a really good idea to look at how much you're investing now and also how much you plan to invest in the future, because you don't really want to be investing for like 6 months and then think, now I need to move platforms because this is better, and weigh up whether that flat fee works for you or whether a percentage fee is better.
And shall we start then by talking about stocks and shares ISAs to begin with? Because there's money to be saved here, not necessarily on fees, but on taxes. Megan, can you talk us through?
Yeah, so when you invest in an ISA, you don't have to pay any income tax, dividend tax, capital gains tax, no tax at all. And you can invest up to £20,000 each year into an ISA. So the tax year rolls from April to April. So when you get to the next April, you'll get another £20,000 to invest. But yeah, if you have an allowance for each of these taxes, but for any returns you get above these allowances, you won't have to pay anything in an ISA. But if you invested in a general investment account, you would. So you can make some big savings, especially if you have more invested.
And there were recent announcements in the budget around capital gains tax. Laura, can you remind us what we need to know here about capital gains? And has that inspired more people to consider putting cash into a stocks and shares ISA?
Yeah, so those changes that were announced in the budget is an increasing of the tax rate that you pay for any capital gains you have. So for basic rate taxpayers, it's increasing from 10% up to 18%, so a pretty chunky increase. The higher rate of capital gains tax is rising from 20% up to 24%. In recent years, we've also seen the tax-free allowance for capital gains chopped down massively. So it was just over £12,000 a year. Now it's £3,000 a year. So what that means is that people who've had investments for a long time outside an ISA or a pension that they've got decent gains on are going to be more likely to pay tax because it's not going to sit within that tax-free window. And then that tax rate that they pay is going to be higher because it's been increased. So it really does bolster the need for using an ISA or a pension where you get tax benefits, although obviously the money's locked up for longer there. And we have seen lots more people do what's called a bed and ISA transaction, which is a lovely bit of industry jargon. But effectively it means you take money from your non-ISA account, you bank those gains up to your tax-free allowance in the year, so £3,000 worth of gains in the current tax year, and then move it into your ISA so that future gains are protected from tax. So we've seen lots of people do that, or move money to a spouse. If you move money to a spouse and it's got capital gains on it, then you don't have to pay the tax on that. That gain kind of moves to your spouse, and then they can make use of their capital gains free allowance or ISA allowances.
But there are some fees that you might want to consider with ISA accounts, aren't there?
Yeah, so all the fees I mentioned earlier, you'll still have to pay. Some platforms might advertise themselves as free, but actually you will have to pay a fee to have a stocks and shares ISA, where you might get a general investment account for free.
And what about then moving money from one ISA to another? So firstly, why would you do this and how easy is it?
Yeah, so if you're not happy with your current platform where you have your stocks and shares ISA, maybe you're paying too much in fees and you want to move to a cheaper platform. With the stocks and shares ISA, you can't just take all your money out and then put it into a different ISA if you're going over that £20,000 allowance, because it would count towards it. It's not a transfer like that. So if you have a stocks and shares ISA that you'd like to transfer, there are two ways that you can do it where you can still keep it and you don't have to use up your allowance. The first is a cash transfer, where you sell your investments and then you transfer the cash from one ISA provider to another. And then the second type is called an in-specie transfer, where you transfer your investments as they are, you stay invested, but you transfer them from one platform to another like that. The reason you might do the second in-specie transfer is because if you take the money out of the investments and you turn it into cash and then you transfer it, when you are in the second ISA and it's time to invest, you might actually be buying into it again at a bad price. So say you sell your investments in the first platform, and actually the investments at that time are doing quite badly. You'll sell at a low price, but then if in the time that you're transferring they start doing really well, you'll then be buying in at a high price and you'll miss out on that gap, and so you could lose out that way. So in-specie transfers don't have any of that. They transfer across when you're still invested, but they can be a bit of a faff. There's a lot of the platforms talking to each other, and one platform's hitting a delay and then another one, and in theory it takes up to 30 days, but we have seen instances where people get stuck with these really stressful delays because they don't know where their money is, and it's just sort of in the ether, hopefully being transferred across.
Well, as you said, it doesn't sound too straightforward. Is this something that needs to be made easier, Laura?
Yeah, so I think that it's a bit like any of these admin tasks, like changing an energy provider or switching a savings account. There's an element of faff, that is a good word, Megan. There's an element of faff and paperwork to it. And I think, like Megan says, it kind of depends what you're doing. That cash transfer is much easier, but you could potentially miss out on those investment returns. If you're moving from one mainstream provider to another and you're moving fairly standard investments across, then that process should be pretty simple, as long as you respond quickly to the emails or 20 requests for information from those platforms. Is when you're moving from older providers that maybe rely a bit more on actual physical paperwork, or if you've got some tricky investments that your new platform won't have, that you then have to cash out of, that's when things become a little bit more complicated. But moving between kind of mainstream providers with standard accounts should be fairly simple now.
And before we get into the different investment platforms out there, to round up on stocks and shares, ISAs, when might or might not it be right for you? And I'm thinking also about the tax-free allowance here.
So generally with an ISA, if you haven't used up your £20,000 annual allowance elsewhere, so on cash ISAs or other ISA accounts, then it's kind of a no-brainer to use that for investing rather than using a general investment account. There's not really a reason why you wouldn't, unless you've already maxed out that ISA allowance, either through investing or through cash and other ISAs.
Well, after the break then, we'll be diving into the different investment platforms out there and the fees they come with, as well as which might be right for you. We'll be back after this.
Hi, I'm Andy Webb.
And I'm Amelia Murray. We're the hosts of Cash Chats, the award-winning podcast from BeCleverWithYourCash.com.
Now, if you're enjoying listening to the Which Money podcast, then we know you'll love Cash Chats too, your go-to podcast to help you make the most of your money.
Each week we share our top tips, secret hacks and the latest deals so you can master your finances and keep more money in your pocket.
We're the only podcast that covers every single bank switching deal to help you make hundreds of pounds each year. Some of our listeners have made thousands.
We'll also tell you where to get the best savings rates, how to beat TV streaming hikes, whether you should overpay on your mortgage, and much more.
And if you want to know where to buy a cheap bottle of Baileys, bargain theatre tickets, or get the latest credit card welcome bonus, you'll be sure to find something in our deals of the week.
New episodes are out every Tuesday and Friday mornings on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and all podcast apps. And you'll find us on YouTube too.
Just search Cash Chats Podcast and hit follow.
Welcome back to the show. So let's get into some of the biggest investment platforms and their fees. Megan, where shall we start?
So we can talk a bit more about the fixed fee percentage fees that Laura mentioned earlier. So some platforms charge, it might be a monthly fee, say $5.99 a month, and that's your account fee set, whereas others charge a percentage of your investments. So as Laura mentioned, this is particularly good for investors with a smaller amount of money, whereas if you have that fixed fee monthly payment, that actually might work out really cheaply if you've got a big investment pot. Some providers also charge a percentage fee but have a cap. So if you have got that large amount of money, it might not necessarily be worse for you to go with a percentage fee platform because actually they've capped the percentage at an amount that's still quite low comparatively.
And Laura, what's AJ Bell's approach then?
So we have a percentage fee model, but with that cap for some investments. So we charge a percentage fee of 0.25%, but there's no minimum each month on that, but there is a maximum of £3.50 a month of the fee that you would pay if you're holding shares. It's slightly different if you're holding funds. So there's still that 0.25% fee, but that's only on the first £250,000 you have with us. Then it reduces to 0.1% for the next £250,000, and then after that there's no charge. And then we have these fixed fees for dealing costs, as we talked about earlier. So it's really important, I think, to look at those fees, look at the size of portfolio you've got, but it's also important to look at all of the other factors. So is the provider offering the account that you want? What's their customer service like? What's their financial backing like? Like lots of things in life, you can get a bargain basement, very cheap price for things, but you might be compromising on the range of investments or the customer service or how you can contact them, or being able to have a stocks and shares ISA rather than a general investment account. So it's really about thinking what you want for your purposes and for your investing needs, and then picking the most cost efficient option for that.
Well, should we talk about some of those things and that you should also consider to work out if it's right for you? I mean, one that comes to my mind is, is it worth working out how often you're going to be trading before you choose the right platform?
Yeah, I would say definitely. I think if you're, a really keen and experienced investor and you'd like to trade often, it won't make sense for you to go with a platform that has high trading fees. But a lot of people will just sort of make that one investment and then hold it for years. So it really depends on the person what the right platform is, because the personal costs are going to be different.
And what about then the types of things you might want to invest in? So firstly, how should this impact the platform you choose? And are there any types of funds you'd suggest our listeners look into at the moment?
Yeah, so I think that is really important, because some platforms, what are often called kind of robo-advisor platforms, will guide you to a fund choice, but they'll only have a handful of funds on their platform, whereas others will offer absolutely every investment that there is out there. And those work for different customers. Some people really want that guidance and they don't want a lot of choice. Some people really want the ability to invest in lots of different shares and funds and to have that full choice. So it's really important to think about what you want now, and also a bit in the future. Do you want to be constrained by those options before you pick your platform? But those ones with restricted choice do end up being quite good for some beginners who really struggle with kind of researching all of the funds out there. But what I would say is that there's loads of help out there now. There's loads of kind of first-time investor guides. There's lots of things called like favourite funds lists that different platforms will have that really narrows down that range to make it seem less overwhelming. And there's lots of good options in terms of the kind of strategies and the funds that you can pick as a beginner investor.
And now we've got all of this context then, Megan, can you give us a kind of insight in a nutshell to the table toppers in this field, that the investment platforms that we review that we think are the best out there?
Yeah, so we conduct a big customer survey. So we ask our own members, we ask members of the general public to tell us about their investment platforms. And we combine that with what I do as a fees analysis. So I'm taking in some of these different fees that we've talked about, thinking about different investors who have different amounts of money and which platforms are consistently good value. And so in that, both AJ Bell and Vanguard come out as which recommended providers. So the customer score is really high, and they do well in the fees analysis as well.
We should also say that these are an alternative to opting for a financial advisor. So can we just outline, when might a financial advisor be the better option, if at all?
So a financial advisor can be like a really useful asset to you if you're just completely baffled by investments. And a lot of people are, they just think, I don't want to deal with this, I don't know what's going on, which is completely fair enough. You will pay a much higher fee to work with a financial advisor, but you'll get someone who can talk to you, who can explain everything and who can take care of that for you. So for some people, that will be the right choice, especially if you've got more complex things to work out. It's really valuable.
Is there a kind of recommended amount that you would want to be saving before going for a financial advisor?
So a lot of financial advisors, it is quite tough to have enough money to see a financial advisor. Basically, they have a minimum investment requirement a lot of times. So generally, if you've got less than £50,000 to invest, you won't really be able to see a financial advisor. Around 20% won't see you if you have got less than £200,000. So you need to have more money to invest to be able to work with a financial advisor, yeah.
Well, we have covered so much already today, but just before we wrap up, any final advice, whether it be for beginners or seasoned investors? Laura, do you want to start us off?
So I would say look at regular investment services. So we talked a bit about dealing fees, but often platforms will provide you with a discounted dealing fee if you set up a regular investment service. And this is where you're paying in a certain amount of money each month. That's automatically invested by the platform into the investment of your choice. And then you get a fee discount for doing that. And actually, for beginners, that can be a really good option because you're automating that investment process. And it means you don't have to think about it and think, oh, is this the right time to buy or not? It takes an admin thing off your list, which I am all for. And you get it for a cheaper dealing cost. And so for beginners that are starting out with smaller amounts of money, that can be really good. But even if you're an experienced investor and you're putting a lot of money in, everyone likes to save money.
Yeah, I would just reiterate Laura's earlier point about it's not all about fees. Fees are obviously really important, but don't forget to consider other factors when you're choosing where you can invest your money, which platform to pick, but also the investments themselves. Don't just pick the cheapest funds you can find, because there is more to it. You should just be thinking longer term as well.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. It's been a cracking episode. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, a huge thank you again to Megan and Laura for coming on the show today, and to you for also listening to this week's episode of the Which Money podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please do hit subscribe to make sure you catch our new episodes as soon as they drop. For daily money news and advice, you can find us on social media at Which Money and online at which.co.uk/money. And we also have a free money newsletter, which is delivered to your inbox every Monday. To sign up, visit which.co.uk/money newsletter. This episode of the Which Money podcast was written and presented by Mealy Chair Ariano, recorded by Romana Yassin, and produced and edited by James Rowe.
If you're enjoying this podcast from us here at Which, then why not become a Which member? Right now, we've got a special offer, especially for podcast listeners, meaning you can choose any of our 3 membership tiers for 50% off the usual price. Starting at just £39.50 for a full year, you can get Which magazine delivered direct to your door. For the same price, you could also choose a digital Which subscription, giving you access to all of our product reviews, the Which app, and the digital edition of Which magazine. What's more, you'll also be able to use the Ask Which service for personalised one-to-one buying advice. Or why not get a full access Which subscription for just £49.50 for a full year? Don't forget, that's 50% off the usual price. To join Which or to find out more, just head to which.co.uk/podcast offer. That's which.co.uk/podcast offer. Or click the link in the description for today's podcast for 50% off a Which annual subscription.